Do English questions confuse you? That's because they can be confusing. So in this lesson, we will look at 12 different questions in English, very common questions, which sound similar and often are similar, but the meaning is very different. So let's see if you know the difference, and by the end of this lesson, you will be able to ask questions correctly and more confidently. All right? So let's get started. So these are actually 6 pairs of questions. So let's look at the first 2. So I'm going to read it for you. Listen, tell me if you know what the difference is, if there is a difference, and so on. Okay? Number 1, how are you? Number 2, how do you do? So there is a difference between these 2 questions. Do you know what it is? Which one do you use most often? And which one do you use for what purpose? Okay? All right. So this is the difference. Let me start with the second one. How do you do is only used the first time you meet someone. So, for example, when you're introduced to someone in a slightly formal context, and also perhaps more in England and so on, then people say, hello, my name is so-and-so. How do you do? And the answer to how do you do is, how do you do? So you're not asking the first one, how are you? You're just saying, how do you do? How do you do? This is what the 2 people say. And all they're saying is, it's nice to meet you. Okay? Because it's only used the first time you meet a person. After that, you don't say, how do you do again. After that, you say the first one. If you meet that person or anyone, just say, hi, John, how are you? Hi, Mary, how are you? Okay, so that question actually is answered, all right? Whereas this one is, how do you do? How do you do? The first one is if someone says, hey, John, how are you? And so John will say, depending on the relationship and how formal it is, John will say, oh, fine, good, great, so-so, excellent, whatever John is feeling that day, okay? So there you are looking for an answer. And after you give your answer, usually you switch it around and you say, I'm great, how are you? Or I'm great, how about you? Or, and you? Okay? So how are you is really asking how you are. And how do you do is just something formal that we say when we're introduced to someone the first time, not after that. All right? Now, in spite of what I've said, in North America, we tend to not use the how do you do so much. And even the first time we're introduced to someone, we might just say, hello, I'm John. How are you? Okay? So keep that in mind. Next, let's look at the next pair of questions. So here, I've written color, but really the question is, when do we say what and when do we say which? Okay? So let's look at this example. If I were to ask you, what color do you like? Or, which color do you like? What's the difference? Is there any difference? There is actually. So if I say, what color do you like? I'm just saying, out of all the colors in the world, all the beautiful colors, which is your favorite? Which one do you like? Okay? So out of all the colors, what color do you like? It's not a specific choice. It's just wide open. Here, with which color do you like? So maybe I have a red marker and a blue marker, and I say, which color do you prefer? Which color do you like? Red or blue? Okay? So there we have a choice. It doesn't have to be only 2. It could be 3 or 5 or 7, but it's a limited choice. Okay? So for example, if I ask you, what kind of music do you like? Okay, I don't know you at all. So out of all the different kinds of music in the world, what kind of music do you like? What kind? Okay? Or I could ask you, which kind of music do you prefer? Rock or jazz? Okay, now it's out of a limited choice. Got it? Okay, so as I said here, you could actually say anything like what kind of books do you like to read, or which book do you prefer, this one or that one? What kind of movies do you like, or which kind of movies do you prefer? Okay, so keep that in mind. Next, we come to this one, which is really important and actually leads to lots of mistakes. So what is the difference if I start a question with how much, or if I start a question with how many? Which one do you choose and why? So this has to do with a point of grammar, which has to do with the countable or uncountable nouns. Okay, what does that mean? So for example, how much time do you have? Uncountable. In English, time, the word time is uncountable. But how many hours do you have? Okay, how much time do you have before your flight, or how many hours before your flight? So time is an example of an uncountable noun, and hours is an example of a countable noun. All right? Or for example, at the airport, again, they might ask you, how much luggage do you have? Luggage is uncountable, so we say how much luggage. But they may ask you, how many suitcases do you have? Okay, they're talking about the same thing, but luggage, they're talking about overall. Okay, it's like a category. And how many is the individual pieces. So how many is always used when you can count whatever you're talking about. So let's say you go into a coffee shop where you can also buy coffee in bulk. Okay, you can buy it in quantities. So how much coffee would you like? Half a kilo, 1 kilo, okay, quantity-wise. Or how many bags of coffee would you like? How many cups of coffee? We can count the bags, we can count the cups, right? Similarly, how much information is needed, or how many reports? You see, information, uncountable, reports, countable. All right, and the uncountable nouns are always singular. All right, now I have a special lesson on those, on that particular point about countable and uncountable, and also about some of these, and I will give you the links to those lessons if you want to get a better understanding of that particular point. This one in particular could lead to a lot of very basic mistakes, okay? So be careful. Next, this is really interesting and a bit advanced. So do we say, what will you do? Or what would you do? This is a bit of an advanced point, okay? So what will, let me give you an example, okay? So somebody's interviewing a candidate who's running for to be the president. And so the journalist asks the person, what will you do when you become president? Okay, it looks like the person's going to win. What will you do? It's just a future question, and it's a real question because there is a very strong chance that this person will become president. What will you do? Okay, but what would you do if you became president? This is an unreal situation. So these are sort of like conditional questions. What would you do if you were president? Is unreal, conditional. What will you do when you are president? Okay? So here it could also be, what will you do when you are? What would you do if you were? Okay? Or for example, let's take an ordinary example. It doesn't have to be what, it could be where. Where will you stay when you go to London? Okay, this is a real situation. You're really going to London. So I am asking you, where will you stay when you go to London? Okay, a real situation. Unreal situation. Where would you stay? You don't have a plan. You're just thinking. It hasn't happened yet. It's an unreal situation. So we say, where would you stay if you went to London? Okay. Now, these questions are a little bit more complex because you have to change the other part of the verb there. But be aware that will is just direct about the future, and would is an unreal hypothetical possibility. What will you do when you win $1 million is a very positive thinking person asking this question, but probably they say, what would you do? Okay. What would you do if you won $1 million? Okay. All right. So that's that pair. Now let's look at the next one, 9 and 10. Now this one, when I say them, you're not going to hear any difference. So I could say whose, or I could say whose. Did you hear any difference? No, because it sounds the same. These are homonyms. Okay, they sound the same, but they are spelled very differently. So if you're writing, you need to make sure you're using the right word. So what is whose? What does it stand for? It could be who is, okay? Or it could be who has, okay? So the who apostrophe s. So for example, who's coming to the party means who is coming, right? And who has, it could be like who has been to London, right? Whose. Again, this could be who is or who has, all right? Who is there, all right? Who has been there, okay? And this one, whose, which sounds the same but spelled differently, this is talking about possession or ownership. Whose cell phone is this? Whose book is this? Whose backpack is that? Okay? Who does that item belong to? All right? There we go. So that's whose and whose, but spelled very differently. Okay? And the last two, how far and how long. Okay? And what's the difference there? Do you know? Think about it for a second. So if I ask you, how far is your home? Now, if I say how far, usually I'm talking about distance, okay? So I could say it's 2 kilometers away, but it could also you could also answer me in terms of time. So, it's about 20 minutes away. How far is your home? It's about 20 minutes away. Or how far is your office? 2 kilometers away. Okay. Usually it depends for what reason you're asking, and then you may answer according to that. Okay. Now, how long is really usually talking about time. For example, how long is your flight? Oh, it's 8 hours. It's 4 hours. It's 18 hours. Okay. So usually it's talking about time, how long, but how long could also be physical measurement, like how long is this table? Okay. Or something like that if you're measuring something. All right. So it could be time, and it could be something physical, which you are measuring the length of something. All right. So here we go with 12 different questions. I hope that now you have a much better understanding of what they are. Let's just review very quickly a few of them. So which of these do you say when you meet someone for the first time only? You say the second one. How do you do? And how do you answer it? How do you do? And what and which? What is out of all the possibility? What do you want to do today? Okay. Out of all the possibilities of what we could do. Or which restaurant would you like to go to? The Chinese one or the Thai one? Okay. A specific choice. Next, how much and how many? Remember, how much? Water. But how many glasses of water? Like that. Okay. Countable, uncountable, and countable. What will you do after this lesson? Okay. Or what would you do? Okay. So would is a hypothetical possibility, and will is a real possibility. What you could do is go to our website at EngVid.com and do a quiz on this so you can master that, okay? Master the questions. Next, whose and whose. Again, this is a mistake in writing. So whose is who is and who has. And whose means who does this belong to? Okay? And how far and how long, we talked about that. How far is it in terms of distance or sometimes in terms of time? And how long means usually for time. How long is the movie? Oh, it's 2 hours. Okay? Or how long is the table? And it's this length. Okay? So there you are. I hope this lesson helped to clarify for you some of these very commonly used questions. All right? So you'll ask them correctly and also answer them correctly. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.